The Fantasmagorium show presents Guns, Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns. Tonight, we are going to continue towards the light at the end of the tunnel that is seeing No Time to Die. We're going to talk about our favorite and least favorite villains, and tonight we feature the only Lazenby Bond film on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I am Scotty, my opposite number Catherine is here, and Steve is on top secret special assignment. Hey, Kat, what's going on?
Good stuff. Ready for tonight.
I know we don't have a whole heck of a lot of news, but we got a heck of a lot of stuff to talk about. So I am just going to go straight for it, gun barrel style. A couple of news items to cover. The No Time to Die film that we've been hearing so much about. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit? Okay. Well, it's supposed to make its first festival debut at Zurich. The 17th Zurich Film Festival will host the Swiss premiere of No Time to Die, the 25th James Bond film on September 28th. Bastards. It's the first time a Bond movie has been in the official selection of a festival. Its artistic director, Christian Jungen, said, the festival will also stage a retrospective of the other Bond movies starring Daniel Craig. Jungen said, we are extremely pleased to be one of the first in the world to show our audience the most recent Bond adventure, Jungen said. We fought for months to get this premiere and had to negotiate every last detail with the distribution company, Universal. Never before has a James Bond been in the official selection of a film festival. I am further pleased that the ZFF, or ZFF, depending on where you live, has succeeded in this coup as it sends out a powerful signal that highlights the importance of cinema. The industry has waited more eagerly for this movie than any other. Now, Kat, does that mean is this the first official selection of a Bond movie at any film festival or just the Zurich?
No, first time at any major film festival ever.
Really?
Yeah.
That's kind of shocking considering some of the high points in the franchise.
Yeah, I figured Casino Royale and Skyfall would have been, selected given how good those films were, or, the earlier ones. But nope, it's the first time ever, which makes me wonder if it's like a marketing ploy, like, hey, maybe, because the thing about a film festival is you have to submit the movie to the festival. Mm-hmm. And it has to then be selected amongst the films that are put forward to decide if the people running the festival think that's worthy of, okay, we'll pick your movie kind of thing. So they've never done this before with Bond. So they might have done it probably as a marketing ploy, but the fact that the festival actually felt a Bond movie was worthy of selection, I think that also says something, because the Zurich Festival doesn't, it's more of an artsy festival as well. It's not always, putting up a bunch of big Hollywood tentpole films. And I don't think it's simply because, the pandemic has limited the amount of movies out, because people are getting more movies are out there, you just have to look for them. So I think that does show a reflection of the quality of the movie they have here.
And I hope so. I certainly hope so. I haven't heard any early reactions as of yet, but it also says, based on the artistic director, that it's a coup and it sends out a powerful signal that highlights the importance of cinema. So it could also be just encompassing, that little thing that happened over the last 18 months that everyone has to get back into theaters, please. We'll show you a Bond movie. So that could be part of it, not just marketing for Bond, but also for movies in general.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. It's like, hey, we know the worldwide audience is a bit wary about going back, and we also know that they don't usually pay attention to some of the artsier festivals unless they're cinephiles. So hey, we'll put on a Bond movie to catch your attention instead.
Well, and if I could get to Zurich, that would be fun. All right, so then next up we have No Time to Die director Corey Joji Fukunaga says Safine's not, as some have speculated, Dr. No. No Time to Die director Corey Joji Fukunaga has opened up about the movie's villain Safine, played by Rami Malek, and dispelled a popular theory. He's not, as some have speculated, Dr. No, the filmmaker told SFX.
Yeah,
so that kills that.
It sort of. I think that what it is I do think Lucifer Safin is an original character. Okay. I just think that given the Bond franchise borrows from itself all the time, be it plot elements or like Moonraker, which is kind of copying The Spy Who Loved Me plot again, just in space, that I think they took character traits of Julia Snow from the book and gave it to the Safin character. And it's kind of a neat way to bookend the series in a way. It's like the first film, Dr. No mentions he's a part of Spectre, but you never get to see Blofeld or any of the other Spectre agents or the Spectre bases or anything like that. And it's not until the sequels you get there. Whereas this movie, it sounds like Safin is on the outs, doing his own thing kind of thing, which has some ties to Spectre, which would be sort of a neat mirror image, working it back around type of thing.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of him being an original character. I don't like the implication. I mean, it's one thing when they recast Blofeld because that's kind of tradition by this point. Mm-hmm. But to rehash old villains is kind of like saying, well, we're out of ideas or we're not really proud of what we did before, so we're just going to do the same thing again. So I really like that it's original character, and the fact that he said that it is a lot harder to write these movies than people seem to think. It's not like, oh, you follow an instruction manual, step 1, step 2. It's so I do like this, and I think that despite the fact that they were writing on the fly, that it's going to be not much of a problem. It'll be something special.
Well, and I agree with you. I'd rather see someone original than a rehash, although I was excited for Christoph Waltz playing Blofeld, just because I wanted Blofeld and Spectre to come back, and that was not as interesting as I would have liked it, but it was still interesting enough. And so now I'm glad that Safin is an original character, although it's still, and I think we've talked about some of the decisions for production design. There are some definite echoes of the sets and the production design harkening back to Dr. No, which is great. I have no problem with homage. Yeah,
I think each of the Craig films have been homaging the Connery films very deliberately. Like Casino Royale was the origin story, whereas Dr. No was the introduction to the character for most people. From Russia with Love and Quantum of Solace were direct sequels to their predecessors. Both Goldfinger and Skyfall took a break from the overarching story, had wildly popular title songs, were wildly popular films with casual fans, whereas both Thunderball and Spectre returned to the overarching story, weren't as popular as the predecessors, but were there. And while You Only Live Twice, the movie heavily departed from the book, I think this movie, watching the trailers for No Time to Die, it seems like it's homaging bits from the You Only Live Twice novel. A lot more than the other ones, and I think there are certain plot points which will rear their head in this movie. I'm not going to get into it in case people don't want it spoiled, but not that I know anything. I'm just assuming from things I've seen in the trailers that were like little cues back to the book. So yeah, I think that's kind of what they're doing. So I do like that they're bringing back the whole Ken Adam type of. It feels like from these trailers that this movie's probably going to be the most fantastical of the Daniel Craig era, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as I say, I think the Craig era needs that, because the common criticism has been the stakes in the Craig era have been pretty low, and it's like, can we see him save the world now?
Well, and that has been I wouldn't say a complaint, but a concern from the more diehard James Bond fans, is that enough of him going rogue or going, like, at least the first one was an origin story, but at least it was a mission, and then Quantum was sort of him going rogue a bit, and Skyfall was, well, no, that was a mission. Okay, maybe the people who are complaining about, I want to see Bond on a mission, he's been on a bunch of missions.
Well, I think they just want to harken back to the classic mission, where it's like you have the pre-title scene, and you take one little plot point from that into M's office after the titles, and M gives, oh, something happened, Bond, we want you to go investigate, and then that kind of, he goes to Q Branch before he leaves and flirts with Moneypenny, and then he's off. They haven't done that classic format in the Craig era at all.
True. And we're not going to get that quite yet, though, because we still, as you've seen the end of Spectre, he basically walks away. The only thing you're missing from the end of Spectre is the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service with
I think that which we'll get to tonight, but I think this movie is definitely going to be unique because it is wrapping up all those storylines. And if my hunch is correct about how they're homaging the first Connery films and those novels, then there's a particular stickler plot point from You Only Live Twice, the novel, which I think is definitely going to pop up in this movie, because I think that's probably what Madeline's secret is. But we'll see in 30 days.
Okay. Well, can you hint? What's from the book? What's the thing from the book?
Well, it's Safin alludes to it in the trailer when he says that when your skills will die with your body. Mine will survive long after I'm gone. And life is all about leaving something behind, isn't it? And he says that last bit with like a little twinkle in his eye. And I'm like, I got it.
All right. So you're saying I have to read the book if I want to know this particular potential spoiler.
Yeah, there's no way you can really hint at it without spoiling it. But again, I could be wrong. I'm just getting the sense that I don't think that I am.
Well, I'm going to have to make a note of it and find out if it pops back up.
Yeah.
And then see if your theory is correct, even though there are no stakes, you haven't laid your theory out.
That's true, but I didn't want to lay the theory out in the off chance that it's right and spoil it for the viewers.
I understand, and I appreciate your courtesy. I don't mean to make fun. I'm just saying you've gone all in without betting a penny. It's interesting.
Let's put it this way. At the end of You Only Live Twice, he suffers amnesia, and he's living with Kissy Suzuki as a fisherman in the Japanese countryside. And she knows something that she desperately wants to tell him, but he wants him to propose marriage first. And unfortunately for her, he sees an article in the newspaper about something relating to Vladivostok, Russia, and that starts jogging his memory, and he takes off. And the plot point, the audience wasn't let in on the secret of what secret she had, the things she really wanted to tell him and why she wanted to wait for him, because she wanted him to marry her because he loved her, not because of blah, blah, blah. But Ian Fleming never returned to that plot point before he died. So, that's a little bit of a hint. You could probably think from there as to what the secret would be in that case. But,
okay, yeah,
that's good.
That's good. That's good enough for me. I think I coaxed it out. That was good. And then finally, just to wrap up on the news, and I know we got a bunch to talk about in regards to this. Being James Bond is now available on Apple Plus. As part of the run-up to the long-awaited and much-delayed release of Daniel Craig's final James Bond film, No Time to Die, the studio has released a 45-minute documentary, Being James Bond, reliving Craig's career as the world-famous spy. The film includes never-before-seen archive footage of the making of Casino Royale, as well as a sneak peek at No Time to Die. In addition, Craig discusses the highs and lows of production on the franchise with producers Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli. Now, we both had an opportunity to see this documentary. Actually, it was you who messaged me and said, it's up. So I checked it out, and almost immediately after that, what were your thoughts on this documentary?
There are a couple surprises in it. A couple things we're retreading old ground, like Craig talking about how it kind of messed him up a bit to read all of the ridiculous controversy from the so-called, the fans who were complaining that, oh my God, he's got blonde hair. What are we going to do type thing. And how he finally, after all night reading that crap, just said, you know what, fuck it. I know we got a good movie. The fact that going into the first big surprise, they were talking about Quantum of Solace, and they're kind of acknowledging that, yes, the script was a mess to begin with. Then the writer's strike made it worse because they couldn't fix it. So Barbara says they literally did not have a script that reasonable to work with when they went into it, which is, wow. And I guess, that movie, I admit, has a bunch of faults we'll talk about later, but I'm surprised it holds together as much as it does, considering she said they literally did not have a script. The next thing which surprises me was Inspector. While unfortunately they didn't talk about how they came to some of the story decisions they made, I didn't realize that Daniel was dealing with a severe leg injury throughout all of filming, and that it literally affected how they filmed certain sequences. Specifically, he talks about the pre-title scene and how he's kind of stalking him through the crowd. I suspect that probably had an effect on how easily Bond escapes the Spectre base at the end of the movie, because he's just like doing a quick little jog out as opposed to like a big intense action scene. And how he said he was wearing like a bionic leg attachments throughout. So I was like, wow, that probably did have an effect on it. But they kind of, skimped over some of the story points there. And when they got to No Time to Die, he was kind of talking. He set the record straight, as I always suspected, that it's not that he hated playing James Bond. It's just that he was getting so many injuries and was so, particularly the Spectre, so, that was such a grind for him that he was just, by the time the press junket came up, he was just done,
Well, and I really appreciated what he said. Is like, if you were 20 yards away from the end of a marathon and someone said, do you want to run another marathon? The answer is F no. No, I don't.
Yes.
And I know that Terje from Classic Movie Corner or Cult Classic Movie Corner has said, forget Daniel Craig. I'm not going on a retrospective about this because I know he hated it. He wanted to slash his wrists. And I think that you and I are in the same camp of, dude just finished a day of work. And then they said, do you want to go back to work right now? And he was like, no.
Yeah. And then I actually was also really happy because I read a Forbes article back in March 2020, and they were talking about how because of Daniel's injury at the beginning of filming for No Time to Die, they had to take some of the sequences they're shooting in Jamaica and rearrange it to shoot it at the very end of the shoot, but at Pinewood in England instead. And I always knew that the final shot that they actually shot with him as 007 is running down some alley, but they actually showed it in the documentary. It's him and actor David Densick holding a briefcase, and he's like, or a big like metal case, and he's running behind him in an alley. And I thought that's really cool that they showed us that, so now I'll know I'll recognize it in the movie. And he did give a pretty nice going away speech, and you could tell he was very touched. He was very happy, again, putting those ridiculous rumors to rest. No, he's always enjoyed this character. He's very grateful that he got to play it, and now it's age has kind of caught up with him. It's time to hang up the suit, so to speak.
Well, and it was a very touching, emotional speech that he gave to the crew that was present. And he acknowledged that he'd been working with a lot of them for over 30 years, and a lot of them through specifically the James Bond saga that he was a part of. But going back to his initial casting and the drubbing that he got from the press, I've always talked about, and I'm sure in other movie communities, you've had conversations where you said things like, well, if the internet existed back then, they would never let you get away with this. And it was kind of an interesting look back to the burgeoning days of the internet and how just the press themselves were like the blonde Bond. And one thing is that one of the reporters did say the knives are out for the new Bond. And I was like, isn't that sort of foreshadowing for Daniel Craig's career?
Yeah, like one of the most ridiculous criticisms they hurled at him was that he was wearing the life jacket on his way to the day, the announcement. And like, well, if you look in the picture, all the military guys are wearing it as well. It's protocol. It's required. It's not. It's got nothing to do with him being a sissy. And it's like, but that's how dumb the internet can be sometimes,
Well, and the press at the time as well, tabloids, and mostly the British tabloids, because James Bond is a cottage industry in the United Kingdom. He is a national icon, he's an international icon, but he is distinctly British. All of those things were really interesting. And also there was the way that the documentary is handled. It is almost like they put images over if there was a podcast that was just between Michael Wilson, Barbara Broccoli, and Daniel Craig having a natural conversation. And there are times where he says that Daniel Craig says that the response to him initially, yes, the life jacket, but also, and I was grumpy at the press conference, and they show it, and it was like, yeah, you were. And so there was even self-awareness and acknowledgement of it. There's some cool behind-the-scenes camera tests for the meeting of Vesper and Bond when Daniel Craig still hadn't bulked up, and they really go into his physical training. A lot of the highlights, and they do touch on some of the lowlights, but as we've been going through these movies week by week, now being on the 5th, 6th,
we're on the 6th tonight.
Yeah, and every time I've been popping a Blu-ray into my player, I've been going through the special features. I've been trying to get as much of the audio commentary as I can, all the old electronic press kit materials that are narrated by Patrick McNee. And it's like, this felt like a special feature for the James Bond movie that I hadn't seen yet. And I really, really liked it. It was a good retrospective of Daniel Craig, the actor, stepping into James Bond, the role.
Yeah, it was. And I do remember that press conference watching it. And yeah, he was grumpy, but some of the questions, like the one that he says in the documentary, where he's like, I'm not going to answer that. I remember what the question was. The reporter asked him which types of actresses, in terms of how hot they are or whatever, would you want to play like Bond girls? And it's like, what you want him to basically tell the ones that he doesn't mention, oh, screw you, and those types of things. Like, yeah, I can imagine you'd be kind of grumpy. You're being announced as James Bond, and that's what they want to ask. because at that time the franchise had been doing that stunt casting thing where they pick like in the Brosnan era, they'll pick, oh, you're the latest It girl, so you can be the lead, that type of thing.
I'm looking at you, Terry Hatcher.
Yes, that was a good documentary. I suspect that since it's only going to be streaming for a month, that it'll probably be on the No Time to Die Blu-ray.
I hope.
Yeah, they had something similar, the Becoming Bond documentary that was also about Daniel Craig on the Casino Royale DVD. So I do think this should be on the Blu-ray, hopefully.
And so if you do want to check that out, it is available on Apple Plus, but I don't have an Apple Plus account. I just went into iTunes and it was available for rent, and I think it's available right up until the release date, up until the end of September.
So October 7th.
October 7th. So that is available for free if you have an iTunes account. All right. So that does it for the news. Now we get into our ranking. Are we ranking or is it just favorite?
Ranking. That's what I got ranks like we advertised.
All right. We got ranks, ladies and gentlemen. So I guess, do you want to bounce back and forth, or do you want to go through one list and then I'll go through one list and then the other list, or?
Let's do one. Let's go your list first.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. I can do that. All right. So my villain ranking, and there are a couple that I have bundled together. So I did not rate every single Blofeld. Although when I do get to Blofeld, I tell you my favorite Blofelds. And then also, a little bit of controversy, I put two villains together because I find them to be exactly the same. So, in bringing up the rear, I have Dominic Green because I found his plan, while grounded and realistic, boring for a Bond film. And also, he wasn't that intimidating a villain at the end, no matter how much he screamed and flailed during that final fight. I've got Kamal Khan. Aside from Louis Jordan's performance and sidekick, I didn't find anything all that meh. Then I have Elliot Carver. I do like Elliot Carver. I like Tomorrow Never Dies, but still for him, a little too scenery chewy. Gustav Graves, I can't believe he made it that high up the list, but I do like how Gustav Graves was sort of the mirror universe version of James Bond. Then I've got Whitaker from The Living Daylights, mostly because of Joe Don Baker. Christatos, I do like Julian Glover, but again, not my favorite. Not my favorite of the Moore era. And again, that's not necessarily one of my favorite, although as we keep going and we revisit, I may have a better feeling towards him. This is where the controversy may arise. I put Drax and Stromberg in the same place on the list. I find them to be nearly identical. One wants to go to space to stop the human race. One wants to live under the sea to stop the human race. Same deal, guys. Same deal.
Very different personalities, though.
Very different personalities. And I think that why I put them together is because Stromberg doesn't necessarily have much of a personality. And so he would be much lower. And The Spy Who Loves Me is a great movie. So I would still. Anyway, then I got Largo because he's a creeper. And also the way he just disregards when his fellow Spectre agent is killed, I thought was pretty cold. Scaramanga, another mirror image of James Bond and Christopher Lee. You can't go wrong. Max Zorin. And well, because it's Max Zorin, it's Christopher Walken. And I do love the cartoony nature of that villain. And also there are ties to Spectre, or maybe more specifically Smersh, but they don't really say it explicitly. Then we get Dr. Julius No, the prototypical Bond villain. I enjoy that man playing not an Asian man playing an Asian man. I enjoy the performance. Len Wiseman is charismatic, and I really enjoyed him. Then Lashif, love Mads Mikkelsen. Then Kananga, because Yaphet Kotto is the bomb and he played two villains, Mr. Big and Kananga. And again, a grounded villain, really enjoyed. And except for when he blew up. Then we get Goldfinger, just based on the legend that is Gert Frobe. I put Red Grant next. I don't know if we covered Red Grant in
we covered him as a henchman.
Yeah, and because I think we were sort of tug-of-warring over as to whether or not he was a henchman or the villain of the piece, I felt the need to put him up there because I wanted to have a little bit of From Russia with Love representation. Then let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, now top 5. Number 5 is Franz Sanchez, because everyone knows I love oh my God, License to Kill, and Robert Davi is amazing. And I really enjoyed that sort of departure of the James Bond franchise, making it the very 80s movie that it was in terms of taking down a drug dealer, although Kananga was a drug dealer. Then I have Raul Silva, being one of the most outlandish, but like in terms of the physical deformity of Silva, the lair, so far he has been my favorite of the Craig era villains. We'll see what Safin does. Number 3 is Elektra King, because of the emotional manipulation and sort of the twist at the end that she was not the damsel after all. She was the one pulling the strings. Number 2 is Blofeld, because of, again, an iconic villain, probably the villain that is most associated with James Bond. And in terms of which are my favorite Blofelds, it goes Telly Savalas, Donald Pleasance, Christoph Waltz, and Charles Gray. And then number 1, Alec Trevelyan, the man who betrayed Bond. I thought it was a personal story. Loved him. Also a creeper. And it's one of my most rewatched Bond movies, and nothing about that seems, I don't know, hokey.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I didn't know that was one of your most rewatched Bond films. That's interesting. All right, my list. In dead last, 21st place, Gustav Graves. They should have kept the guy playing him in the beginning, Colonel Moon. That actor was fantastic. I loved his brief chemistry that he had with Bond. But now let's throw him away for this cartoon character. And granted, in his defense, he's saying that, I based my personality on you, Mr. Bond. Arrogant and all that. So I get, okay, they're trying to excuse it, but I couldn't stand it. In 20th place, this was kind of a twofer because I wasn't sure how you want to look at it. Koskov and Whitaker from The Living Daylights. Whitaker does get the final fight with Bond, so that can account for something, I suppose. I just thought that, Whitaker with all his toys was kind of neat, but it was also a little, it didn't, like, tonally, it was a little off from the rest of the movie that he's that kind of guy, and Koskov was kind of smarmy and just kind of boring. 19th place, I got Aristotle Christados from For Your Eyes Only. I just thought one of the most boring, put-you-to-sleep villains in the series. 18, I got Dominic Green, another smarmy, rich snob type of guy, and it was a shame because he's a really great actor, Matthew Malrick, and they just wasted him. 17, they got Carl Stromberg. Again, he's kind of the script doesn't spend nearly as much time with him as the successor Hugo Drax does, because you're right, they do have the same evil plan. But Stromberg feels a bit more almost like a regular guy. You can have a conversation with him type of thing. He doesn't seem off at all, other than obviously he's evil and wants to, and deranged in that way. But personality wise,
he's got webbed fingers.
Yeah, he's got the webbed fingers. So okay. 16th place, I have all of the Blofelds. I would rank.
Wow.
I would rank them as number 1 would be the Anthony Dawson, Eric Pullman Blofeld, which you never got to see.
Right.
Second would be Telly Savalas. Third would be Christoph Waltz. 4th would be Max von Sydow, and 5th would be Charles Gray.
You didn't even say Donald Pleasance.
That's right. And 5th, I kind of put Donald. Okay, maybe Donald Pleasance gets 5th and Charles Gray gets 6th. Okay. Those two are kind of neck and neck for me in terms of the Blofelds. I just never thought that. Part of why I didn't really care for most of the Blofeld movies, and that's why the character didn't really work for me that very well. 15th place, I have Alec Trevelyan from GoldenEye. Yeah. A good character, but it's like they're telling us that the guy's a Cossack and that he's motivated by revenge, but it's like they're saying that, but I'm not feeling that at all from this character, and he kind of speaks almost in poetry. when he's talking to Bond and stuff once he's revealed as the villain, and it's kind of, I was like, okay, I do like that it's Sean Bean and good performance, but okay. 14th I have Kananga. 13th I have he's Kananga. I do wish that some of his bubbly enthusiasm from the climax was present through earlier moments of the film, because he's just so much fun at the climax, but then they kill him. 13th place I have Emilio Largo from Thunderball. He's kind of menacing, he's intimidating, stands his ground type of guy, and evil. 12th place I have Tiago Rodriguez from Skyfall. Great performance, but they do shoehorn in some of that Dark Knight copying thing with the we're going to do he planned to get caught, the interrogation scene. Instead of a Glasgow smile, we're going to give him this weird melted upper lip. And the fact that he gives this Joker-esque laugh at the end of that scene for no real reason, it seems out of character, but good performance. 11th, I have Franz Sanchez from License to Kill. I love Robert Davi in this role, especially the moment when Dario reveals to him that Bond is, a traitor. And it's like, Sanchez doesn't skip a beat. He's super confident. It doesn't bother him at all. And then that only Robert Davi could pull that off without you saying, "Hey, what the hell? How are you not reacting to this?" 10th place, I have Hugo Drax. He's very socially awkward. I wouldn't be surprised if he was kind of on the spectrum kind of thing, because they never really say why he wants to do what he wants to do, because he's living isolated in his mansion. He's got his Amazon rainforest base out in the middle of nowhere, and then he's got his space. It's like, do you really need to kill the whole human race? But he's so awkward, and he kind of gets under your skin with the way he's so ruthless about doing it. 9th place, this one was kind of iffy because I wasn't sure which one you would consider the main villain. Is Kamal Khan the main villain of Octopussy or Orlov? Because it seems like it would be Orlov, because he's the one who initiated the plan. It was his evil idea. He's the one who would have contacted Khan to say, "Hey, you want these jewels?" kind of thing. And I mean, I know that Bond's entry point into the mystery is through Khan, and Khan gets the climax, but I just feel like the guy who's got the most power, who's instigating this whole thing, was Orlov. So
you have a valid point.
So if Orlov's the main villain, he would have been further down on the list, because I feel he's kind of, Steven Berkoff did a good job, but he's also like a cartoon character. Whereas Kamal Khan by Louis Jourdan I love that character. He's so kind of like Bond's equal. They could face off against each other and you actually believe it. And it's very, the proper kind of guy, he's the guy you're going to face off against in the casino type of guy, and which he does. And I think he's a really cool character. I like him. 8th place is another twofer. It's Electra King and then Renard, depending on Electra King's definitely the main villain, but then Renard kind of gets the final act type of thing. Let's see, 2019, 18, 17, 30, 12, 11, 10. Yeah, so 7th place I have Elliot. 6th place I have Elliot Carver.
Wow.
Yes, from Tomorrow Never Dies. He's very animated, but I think the character kind of called for it. And I think he just really threw himself into that role. So 5th place I have Auric Goldfinger. A great character, and I think he really carries that movie, as we discussed a few weeks ago. He's really fun. I then have Max Zorin, who is one of my favorites in the series. He's so charismatic. He's so evil. And you love it when he's mowing down all of his minions and just laughing and enjoying it, because that makes you you want Bond to kick this guy's ass. And you want him to get under your skin, and he's really great in that role. Third place, I got Dr. No, Julius No. Set the table, very confident. I like that he's, trying to recruit Bond into Spectre, so it's not just a pointless scene of, let's have dinner before I kill you type of thing. Second place, I got Francisco Scaramanga. Perfect casting for that role. Carries that movie as well. And then in first, Le Chiffre from Casino Royale. I think Mads Mikkelsen is the best, as of now, the best actor who has not yet won an Oscar. He's just perfect casting for that. He's so, it's so perfect. I can't find a fault with it. I love it. And the guy's he's not always super confident. He's kind of scared at times, really worried. And it's like, man, this guy's really a bit unhinged in the right moments. And you could tell that he's, perfect.
And I can't disagree with your list.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about the villains?
No, I like the way that I got them all ranked there, but I do think I'm eager to see where Safin will rank on the list. I think it'll probably be pretty high.
Well, and I think once we get through the rest of all of this, it's going to be interesting to go back, revisit, and possibly even re-rank what we've said as well. Just because
Yes.
it's been an interesting journey going through and seeing movies and actually paying attention to them and not just taking them for granted as I have. This is leading up. This is something that I've heard other people do on other podcasts, and this is the first time doing it for myself. And so watching these again, maybe things will change. Like Largo wouldn't have even made, like it would have been Dominic Green and then Largo. And even though he's not that much farther up on my list, I did find him more menacing. And so it'll be interesting to see. And maybe I'll be able to find the differentiation between Drax and Stromberg.
Yeah. As we revisit it. Yeah, I expect some of my rankings to change as well.
Well, now that we've already just dug ourselves out of the hole of having to stand by our rankings and list, let's get into how we feel about On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Part of the reason why this has been included in our countdown to No Time to Die is because if you are not a fan of the James Bond and you're for some reason finding out about all this through this little show, this is the first recasting of James Bond. This is the first James Bond regeneration. We have a new actor stepping into the role that has been made iconic by Sean Connery. And, well, the movie begins.
Yes, the film begins. Bond is in Portugal, and he's driving down the road by the beach, and this woman passes him up really fast. And he's like kind of intrigued. And he starts kind of following her. He's lighting his cigarette, and she gets down to the beach and gets out of the car, runs down to the shoreline. Bond gets out and gets out his binoculars to kind of spy on her, and he sees that she's taking off her shoes and going into the water, presumably to commit suicide. So Bond rushes down there and saves her, but then these goons show up, and there's a fight, which is very awkwardly shot. Same when Bond was lighting his cigarette in the car. You could tell the close-up shots that he wasn't actually sitting in the car. And so they're fighting on the beach, and this is something that I don't like with most all the fight scenes in this movie. It's like, it wasn't necessarily shaky cam. It wasn't, maybe they sped up the film a little bit. It just looked really awkward kind of compared. It didn't seem natural the way they were filming it compared to the way they'd shot the fight scenes in the previous films. So he fights these goons. She, meanwhile, gets into Bond's car and takes off back up to the hillside to get into her own car and takes off. And after Bond successfully defeats the goons, he looks up. He's like, this never happened to the other fella. Just breaking the fourth wall.
Yes. And he does look directly into the camera.
He does. He looks directly into the camera for a second. It's like, okay. So then we have...
okay, before you go on. Okay, so, yes, it does. First things first. Clearly, George Lazenby is younger than Sean Connery was at the end of You Only Live Twice. So when George Lazenby is running towards the ocean to rescue this unknown woman, he's running. It's George Lazenby, and I was like, yay, physical Bond. Now, also, with the fight scene, obviously overcranked. Yeah, there are a lot of snap zooms. It's almost kinetic, the filmmaking or the cinematography of it, to make the impact of the fight more visceral. The impact of the punches in this movie, and I find this throughout the movie, I feel those punches, and also I couldn't help but be taken with the geography of the fight, despite the fact that we're just on a beach. I knew where everything was, so I really enjoyed it, although I've always had a problem with this never happened to the other fella. But this time, for some reason, it didn't rub me the wrong way as harshly. Anyway, we get the most 60s flashback opening music with scenes from the previous Bonds.
And it's the third time that they didn't use a title song. Because, Dr. No didn't have a song. From Russia with Love, interestingly, does have a title song, but they only play it in the end credits. Instead, the title scene was just the orchestral. So this one also just didn't have a song at all. Some people think it's a song that shows up later in the movie all the time in the world. It's like, but that's not original to the movie. So this, I like the sound, the theme they came up with. I thought that was kind of neat. But you're right, it is very 60s, and they're showing all the previous Bonds. I'm like, oh great, remind me of the better movies. Okay. So
I think they had to establish for the audience at the time that yes, this guy who is not Sean Connery is still James Bond.
Yes. So then we come back from that sequence. He arrives back at the casino. The concierge shows him into his room, and it's got a nice view of the pool. You see the reflection of the casino sign. He goes down into the casino, which is really colorful. You got like bright purple walls. He sits down. He's playing Bunko again, the same game that Largo was playing in Thunderball, and they're having a time. And then Tracy shows up again, the woman from the beach.
Va-va-voom.
She apparently doesn't have the money to cover her bet, and she's kind of, the guy's discussing this, whether it's a problem, so Bond bails her out with his own money. And I guess this was done to establish that, so first she's trying to commit suicide, now she's flippantly throwing caution to the wind of the card game, because they never explain in this movie why she changes her mind about committing suicide. It's just like, she kind of does. It's like, oh, okay. So Bond goes to see her she goes to sit down at a separate table after Bond bails her out. He goes over there and orders some caviar and Bollinger Dom Perignon 57. They're talking, and he's like, "Oh, I don't want to have to. Am I going to make a habit out of saving you?" type of thing. And she's like, "Oh, well, unless you have to save me to be able to feel alive." And they're flirting back and forth. And she even gives him her room number and goes back upstairs. So then the waiter shows up with the caviar and the champagne. He's like, "Take that up to room 423." He's like, "Okay." So Bond goes upstairs, and there's this kind of neat light hanging in the hallway. It's like red. I'm like, wow, this is actually a really colorful, interesting looking hotel and casino. So he goes into a room, and there's actually a pretty good jump scare where this thug kind of jumps out from the side and starts attacking, and you have this brutal fight. Bond knocks the guy out, and ever so cool, he just waltzes back to his own hotel room. He's not going to tell security or anything. He gets in there and finds Tracy pulling a gun on him.
Va-va-va-voom again.
Yes, he grabs her and he kind of slaps her around because he wants to know what this was about, because he thinks it's a setup, and she insists that it wasn't. They spend the night together out on the patio. In the morning, he wakes up and she's gone. He opens his little nightstand table where he had hidden his gun, and the gun's gone, but the casino chips that he had used to bail her out is still there, or have been placed there. He's like, "Oh, okay, she covered the debt." So he gets dressed, he leaves, and there's a guy approaches him in the lobby. He's like, "Oh, Mr. Bond?" He's like, "Yes." And then another one of his guys pulls out a gun, and he's like, "Oh, you're coming with us." And of course, Bond, being ever so cool, he cordially leaves the casino, gets in their car, and you see the same thug that he beat up in the room, and he makes some kind of quip, and they drive off down to this warehouse by this construction site. They take him inside the back room, and there's this guy mopping the floor, and if you actually listen carefully, he's humming the tune, or whistling the tune to Goldfinger, which is like another fourth wall breaking reference. So they get to this door, and Bond finally decides that he's done with this, and so he fights them all off. He gets into the door and slams it shut just in time and pulls a knife like he's about to throw it, and you see their boss, Draco Vincenzo. And Bond throws the knife anyway at the guy's calendar, and he starts, Draco's being totally cool with it, and you find out that he basically wanted to kidnap James Bond because he knows who he is, and he's a womanizer and all this. So for some reason, even though it's like, okay, if you know who James Bond is and that he's a womanizer, then you should know he's not one for settling down. But basically Draco's plan is, I'm going to kidnap James Bond, hope he forgives me and marries my daughter just because I asked him nicely, with no implied threat of I'm going to kill you if you don't do it.
Now, it is a very cordial interaction between them, and he does say, "Before you kill me, let's have a drink first. I have a proposition for you." It is, it's a shaky plan. He sits. The Draco already knows that Bond banged Tracy.
Yes.
Doesn't care. It's fine. It's actually beneficial. So you've already done it. I don't see why you wouldn't, and I'll give you $1 million for it. Well, now, Bond,
at first he wasn't going to give him $1 million. He just kept trying to push him to marry her, and he rejects it. And then Draco gets kind of desperate. He's like, "Oh, I'll give you £1 million." Like, just probably, and that's when Bond counters saying, "Oh, how about you tell me where Blofeld is?" Because Draco is the head of this crime syndicate, a real world crime syndicate, mind you, that operates out of Greece and Aegean Sea around there. And so he's like, "I don't really know where Blofeld is, but I've lost a lot of my guys. They've defected to him. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell on Her Majesty's Secret Service, but I might tell my future son-in-law." And so Bond's like, "Oh, okay." And so he kind of agrees to it, and he tells him, "Well, Tracy always comes back for my birthday, which is next week," and he gives him a time and a place to meet, and Bond thanks him. So Bond goes back to MI6. He greets Moneypenny, and she wants him to take him out on a date, the usual type of stuff. He goes inside to M's office, and M asks him about all the follow-up for Operation Bedlam, which is to find Blofeld. And he's like, "Well, how was it in Portugal and Spain and France?" And since all these leads have turned up nothing, M decides to reassign Bond to another case because he's like, "Yeah, it's been 2 years. I know this is a personal vendetta for you, but sorry, you're done." And Bond is really upset, and M, he doesn't want to hear it. So Bond leaves his office and goes very determiningly, walks up to Moneypenny and says, I want you to type this out for me, Moneypenny. She's like, okay. Like, I hereby tender my resignation. And she's like, resignation from what? From Her Majesty's Secret Service. And he gets mad and kind of storms out, and she's kind of shocked. And this is a neat scene where Bond, for the first time, we get to see Bond's office at MI6. And he's got a portrait of the Queen, and he sits behind his desk, and they have this another problem I have with the movie is that they pull out, he opens his drawer and he pulls out these mementos, Honey Rider's knife and belt from Dr. No. Why he has those, I don't know. But you hear the Underneath the Mango Tree playing while he's looking at that. Then he pulls out the watch that he used to read Grant and From Russia with Love, and you hear the theme to that song playing. Then he pulls out the rebreather from Thunderball, and you hear that music playing. And it's like, okay, so they're clearly establishing that this is supposed to be the same character from the previous 5 films. And that's why he was hunting Blofeld at the beginning, because he got away at the end of the previous film, You Only Live Twice. Which I'll get into why I have a problem with that later.
Okay.
So he goes back, so he gets these things, he goes back into Moneypenny's side office, and she's like, oh, he has he's ready for you. So he goes back into M's office, and M doesn't even look up at Bond. He just cuts on the paper, approved. And Bond is kind of shocked that M is being so impersonal about this. And he kind of storms off kind of in a huff back into Moneypenny's office. And he's like, oh, I can't believe this guy. And Moneypenny's like, did you read the note? And he reads it and says, your 2-week leave has been approved. And he's like, he looks all beaming at her. And she's like, oh, you didn't really want to resign, did you? And he's like, oh, Moneypenny, what would I do without you? And he kind of says goodbye. And then M chimes in and says, what would I do without you, Miss Moneypenny? So he knew what Bond was, he overheard what Bond was trying to do. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So then Bond...
Well, and also, just before we get away from Moneypenny, one of the things that I really appreciated about this interaction was with the flirty before he goes in to go see M. Moneypenny says, same old James, which was another one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, no, this is like they're really punching home. This is James Bond. We know he doesn't look the same.
Yeah. So he goes to meet up with Draco and Tracy at this bull ring, and you have these matadors out in the audience kind of thing. And Tracy's talking to, I guess it's her friend or her sister, and she's like, the friend mentions something offhand, and Tracy realizes that there's something afoot. She's like, oh, what arrangement? What's going on with my dad? So that she goes, talks with her, and then she sits down with Bond and Draco, and she finds out that this is actually an arrangement that she suspects that, oh, Bond, because she doesn't know when Bond talked with her father, so she just assumes that this whole time Bond has been, interested in her simply because of some arrangement. And she's like, Father, you once told me that when hosting a guest, you be nice and tell them what they want to know without any obligation. So tell him what he wants to know. So he's like, okay, there's a connection with this Blofeld guy and some lawyer in Bern, Switzerland named Gabold. And he's like, okay. But Bond is still being polite. He's not about to get off and storm away, but Tracy's really upset. And she storms off in a huff because she's like, oh, yeah, but I suppose you have no further use for me, Mr. Bond. But being the gentleman, he decides he has to go apologize. Once again, there's no implied threat from Draco that, oh, if you don't go through this, I'm going to kill you. So he goes to talk to Tracy. He wants to apologize. And then that leads into a montage of them kind of having a little fling. It's like, okay. So the montage ends with Bond, Tracy, and Draco driving up outside the lawyer's office in Switzerland. They drop off Bond. Draco and Tracy drive away, and she seems to have made up with her father, and he's kind of pleased about it. But you can tell he's a little apprehensive because he knows that Bond's going to be going after Blofeld, and he knows that this could get a little hairy.
Well, they are giving, like, he's sitting in the middle, and Tracy and Bond are on either side, and they're making googly eyes after this whole let's fall in love montage. So they're clearly supposed to be at least on the precipice of, like, it's very early for a James Bond movie so far in the series for Bond to be like, yep, this is the lady I'm going to be with for the rest of the movie.
That's the thing. So, well, technically not. So he leaves and goes inside the lawyer's. So he sneaks into the lawyer's office. He then goes out onto the patio, and one of his supporting agents or whatever is standing because next door is one of Draco's construction houses. And this guy puts this big black briefcase inside this concrete mover or whatever. And I guess the person operating that's helping him too. And they move it over to the balcony. Bond gets it. And it's a combination safe cracker and a scanner and printer. So Bond,
photocopier. It's a photocopier in 1969. Not a thing.
Yeah. So he very prescient. So he sits down and flipping through Playboy magazine, which is probably a nod to the fact that that's where Casino Royale first got published in the States, in one of the Playboy magazines back in, it was 1960 when it came to the United States. quite late because it already, the first one was published in 1953. So he gets the paper, the safe opens, he gets out these papers, he copies them, and the papers are that the lawyer of one Ernst Stavro Blofeld is requesting that Sir Hilary Bray of the College of Arms and Genealogy help approve him for. It shows that he thinks he wants to have his lineage approved, and the date is on the paper was June 9th. Mm-hmm. Well, the next paper that Bond copies is dated July 30th. And it's Blofeld's lawyer contacting Hilary Bray again, saying, we haven't heard you from a long time. Why don't you come down? Beauchamp wants to meet you. And I thought it was interesting because the first paper, if you look closely, it does in fact say Ernst Stavro Blofeld on it. Whereas the second paper, Blofeld actually signs it with his fake name Beauchamp, which is the French form of Blofeld, which is interesting. So Bond takes these papers, he goes back, he puts them like in his pocket. He takes that big giant device in the briefcase and sets it back in the the construction carryover machine. Then he leaves, taking the Playboy magazine with him. So then he goes back to MI6, or not to MI6. He goes specifically to M's home, which I believe this is the first time we've seen that in the series. So he goes to see M, and he tells him what he's found, and M's like, I reassigned you from this. He's like, oh, you did, but I think you should reconsider it because I got this information, and I've already checked. I've set an appointment with the real Sir Hilary Bray at the College of Arms, and I've done a bit of my own research for my own genealogy to cover. And he's like, oh, okay. So M concedes, and because Bond actually has a lead for a change, he goes to the College of Arms, and he gets to check out his own arm shield, or whatever. The name's blank on me. What it's called, his own coat of arms, if you will. And it says, "Orbis is sufficient," which is the world is not enough. And he actually says that it should become a title of a Bond movie later on. So he sits down with Hilary Bray, and Bray's like, Bond, I can't really betray your trust, the trust of my clients, unless this is absolutely a matter of national security. And Bond assures him that it is, but doesn't really get into details. So the guy's like, okay, but I don't know if you're going to be able to. And then Bond immediately goes into this impersonation of Bray's voice, which was not his real voice. They dubbed it, which is why it doesn't fit that well. It's a bit strong. And so he's like, oh, okay. So he takes a train to Switzerland, and he gets picked, or no, he takes a helicopter there. He gets picked up by a train. Irma Bunt is at the train station. Right. The very stern woman, no bullshit type. She's got the main henchman with her who's wearing like an Olympics jacket, interestingly enough. So they start walking through the village, and we see Bond's buddy again, the guy who helped him smuggle the copy machine in. He's kind of, minding his own business, keeping a low profile, which is good. So Irma Bunt takes Bond to this horse-drawn carriage. They take off in that carriage up into the mountains, and then they get onto a helicopter, which takes them up to the helipad at Piz Gloria, which in real life was a restaurant that was under construction. It falsely billed itself as the world's first rotating restaurant, but the Space Needle beat them to it in Seattle. And it was still under construction at the time, but the filmmakers offered to pay to finish construction if they gave them exclusive rights to use everything in this building for this movie. So they're like, oh, cool, awesome. And ever since then, they've been just leaning into the whole 007 marketing thing. Recently, they added the 007 walk, where you can walk around on the top of the mountain on this little pathway where they have all these little plaques describing trivia from the film and stuff like that. It's kind of neat.
Well, and on the James Bonding podcast, I think Matt Gorley actually does a fairly in-depth review or tour of it, audio tour of Piz Gloria, and says it's just amazing. If you're a Bond fan, which we are, I would love to go to Piz Gloria at some point.
Yes, yeah, they did have the big 50th anniversary celebrations there, where they got all the cast and the crew. They even got John Glenn, who was an assistant director on this film and going to direct many Bond films in the Roger Moore era. He was there. A lot of my James Bond podcasters I watched, they were there, so it was really cool. Anyway, Irma Bunt takes Bond not into the main building. She takes it down this side stairwell through like an ice tunnel that comes out to a lower door, and she shows him to his room and says, oh, here's the button you press if you want to talk to somebody. The door's locked, so just press the side button if you want out, and we'll see you for dinner at 7. He's like, okay. So Bond keeps the cover going when she shuts the door, and he kind of checks the room to see if there's any bugs, kind of thing. At 7 o'clock, he goes in for dinner, and he's dressed in this kilt with this, the big revêché, and he goes up into the main room, which I wish this lounge was still there, but now it's the main seating area except for the restaurants because it's been expanded. But it's a really nice lounge. It looks like 1960s. You got like the frilly shag carpet. You got the glass tables, and the rotating restaurant tables around, because it takes a full hour to do a full rotation if you're sitting on the restaurant on the ring on the outside.
Mhm.
And all the angels of death are there, as will later be called. And these are women from around the world. All have these bubbly, irresponsible type personalities, and they're all fawning over Hilary Bray. And Irma Bunt isn't really amused, but she lets them talk about what genealogy is. And he is trying to give them an example and asks for one of their last names. And Irma just immediately cuts them off. She's like, no last names here. It's part of the clinic. And he's like, oh, sorry, I didn't know. So like, oh, we'll sit down to dinner now. So they're at dinner, and for some reason, this entire scene is shot with like canted angles and Dutch angles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really weird. And one of the girls is trying to flirt with Bond a lot, and he feels her like touching his leg. And he's like, oh, okay. And then eventually she's like, oh, the host will see you now. Or Irma Bunt tells him that. So she takes him downstairs via the elevator. And Bond is in another nice mini lounge area, but he sees through this big glass, this laboratory. And you have all these vials of like red juices going, and you have a map on the wall, this kind of stuff. And enters Mr. Beauchamp in a lab coat. He takes it off. He greets Sir Hilary Bray. And he's like, oh, you're here to confirm my title. And he's like, well, I'm here to see if it's your title. Oh, there can't be any doubt. Well, if there wasn't any doubt, then I'm sure I would not have been sent down here, Mr. Beauchamp. So he tells him that, oh, I'm going to, I'll give you access to whatever you need, and it's going to be fantastic. And one of the things he mentions is how the Beauchamps don't have earlobes, and Bond sees that he doesn't have the earlobe, so they make small talk. He gets up to leave, and Bond insists that he should come with him to see the tombs of the Beauchamp family, and he mentions the city, and Beauchamp kind of pauses there for a second, but then he keeps talking to him anyway. And of course, the reason Bond wants him to take him there is because Switzerland's a non-extradition country, so he wants to take Beauchamp out of there to have opportunity to arrest him or whatever, but he's not biting. Of course, Beauchamp, as we know, is Blofeld. So Bond is taken back to his room and given all the research materials by Beauchamp that he's going to need. So he lays out all this stuff, and he starts reading through the papers to pretend that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. Because it's true that Bond doesn't know if the claim is legitimate or not, or what the goal is, of like what do you hope to get out of this type of thing. So
Hang on.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that despite everything that happened in You Only Live Twice, now I've tried to suspend my disbelief when watching this film. So they've seen each other. They've had conversations with one another. They know each other. And in this movie, they don't at all. Both played by different actors. Is there an implication of plastic surgery?
So there actually was at a time in the script. They were going to say that Bond got plastic surgery at the beginning, earlier in the movie, to pull off this ruse.
Oh, okay.
And the script was a little different at that time because he was going to do it at like the very beginning to explain why it's George Lazenby instead of Sean Connery. But they thought, that would be a little hokey and weird even for this type of tone Bond. So they didn't do it, and they kind of leave it as it's a fourth wall breaking thing that it's a new actor. And so they just kind of want you to roll with it. But that's another thing that's weird because they explicitly told you this is the same guy and that he's therefore met Blofeld face to face. So there's really no excuse for it. It's just a bad plot hole. Mm-hmm. But Bond does know that it's Blofeld. At least there's that, which is even weirder. It's like he recognizes him, but Blofeld doesn't. I mean, I thought before I went back to rewatch it that maybe Blofeld was just pretending not to recognize him so as not to make a scene in front of everybody else. But no, he doesn't actually know yet. Or he doesn't know until he mentions it.
Later on in the conversation, he does sort of play with Hilary Bray's, like the disguise, the glasses. So it is almost the Clark Kent wears glasses, Superman does not kind of thing.
Yeah, so anyway, Bond's in his room, and he notices that not only did one of the angels of death just kind of fondle his leg, she actually got her lipstick and drew the number 8 for her room number. So Bond's like, oh, okay. So then he MacGyvers the door to get out because it's like electrified. He coyly sneaks around in the hall, goes into room 8, finds her there, and he's trying to press her for information about how she came here, and she doesn't really want to talk about it. They sleep together. Then she says, oh, I had an allergy to chickens, and then I went to see a specialist who connected me with Miss Bunt, and she brought me down here, and they're about to like make out again, but then you hear this odd music playing, and she's like, oh, I can't, it's for the treatment. And the ceiling has almost what looks like disco ball type material.
Like a kaleidoscope kind of thing.
Yeah, and it turns these like rainbow lights, and you hear Blofeld's voice, and he's saying, and it cuts to his secret lab down below, and you see that he's got all these tape recorders set up, and he's putting a different tape in different tape recorders based on what the room numbers are. And what she is being told is that, oh, you will never be allergic to chickens again if you hear the sound of my voice, blah, blah, blah. And you just follow the treatment, and once you finish hearing this, you'll forget everything that I've said, but retain the information, kind of like hypnosis, basically. So it's like Bond finds that really weird. So he leaves to go back to his room, but she wants him to promise that, oh, we can run away tomorrow. And he says, okay, it'll be at 8 o'clock at night, tomorrow night. So he leaves, goes back to his room to find another one of the angels has made her way into his room and wants to sleep with him. And he tries to press her for information, but she's like, oh, in the morning. So he's like, okay. So we cut in the morning, and it's back down at the gondola station where we meet that other agent again, Bond's other partner. And he tries to kind of just walk up and get a ticket for the gondola, and the guys are like, no, and he argues with them, and they're like, oh, it's private, go away, and they get fussy with him. And I'm thinking, it's kind of dumb for you to put yourself on their radar when you could have just sidled up to somebody in the village or at one of the shops and said, hey, what's that up there? Instead of, but no, he decided to make a deal of it, and because they blew him off, he decides he's going to hike up the mountain himself. So then we go back up to Piz Gloria, and Bond and Irma Bunt and the women, or the Angels of Death, are all playing curling. And they're having fun, and Bond slips and slides, accidentally slips, and they warn him, oh, be careful, it's slippery, which comes back later in the movie. Blofeld comes out to greet them in the morning, and Bond talks to him about how he wants to take a day off down in the village, because, of course, Bond knows it's him. He has a vague idea of what might be going on, but he just wants to, go get the cavalry, so to speak. But Blofeld's like, no, Mr. Bray, I've paid you quite a lot of money, and you've just spent all that kind of sleeping. You can stay up here, and it'd be inconvenient for me. We can't prolong this. So Bond's like, oh, that didn't work. He goes back to the curling match, and then he hears a commotion going on. And we see that Bond's partner has been seized by the guards, and they're like, oh, he was climbing up the front of the mountain. So I guess this guy's dumb enough to try and climb into the front door in broad daylight. And so Blofeld's like, hey, you're trespassing. There's plenty of signs. And he's like, hey, you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. You can't take my shit, and whatever. So they presumably take him down to the gondola to take him back to the village. Yes. So then Irma Bunt cuts the curling game short, and she's like, oh, it's time for your massages. So they'll go back inside. And Bond that night decides, oh, once again, he's going to sneak into one of the angels' rooms. Mm-hmm. He goes back into the room number 8 because she was the one who wanted him to come back. And this time he finds Irma Bunt in the bed, which is like, he's like, oh, and he tries to play it off like, oh, mademoiselle. And then
how strange to find you here.
Yes. So he gets knocked unconscious. He wakes up inside that lower lounge where he had first met Beauchamp, and there's a Christmas tree there. And then you see Blofeld, and just as you see him, the map on the wall is being covered by the wall is lowering down, blocking it, so Bond can't see the map. And he says, Merry Christmas, 007. And he's checking out the glasses like you mentioned, and sees that it's fake. And he's like, oh, I'm Hilary Bray. And he's like, oh, no, the real Hilary Bray would have known that the Beauchamp tombs are actually in whatever
somewhere else.
Was not here. And Bond realizes, oh, shit. He realizes he's caught. And he's like, okay, Blofeld, what's your game? And they have this back and forth, and he finds out that he's developing this toxin called Omega Night or something like that. And it's this sterilizing agent, which is capable of sterilizing livestock as well as crops. And he's like, oh, so how much money do you want this time, Blofeld? He's like, oh, it's not money. I'm not going to tell you yet, but when you find out, you're going to love it. He's like, well, how are you going to distribute it? And he's like, oh, I have a manner of that. Call them my angels of death, if you will. He's like, oh, the patients. He's like, yes, and many more. So he's already dispatched other women who are not at this clinic around the world.
Right.
But he says, well,
Two things. First things first. This is a Christmas movie. If you can make the tenuous grasp between any other movie and it being a Christmas movie, I'm looking at you, Lethal Weapon. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a Christmas movie. Also, Black Widow ripped off the plot.
It did, kind of.
Yeah. All right. So Black Widow and this movie are the same.
The one everybody jumps to for that movie is Moonraker, because they actually showed the clip of Moonraker in that movie. But this one, you're right. Okay. Now I think of it, you're right. This one does too. So he's like, oh, let's show Bond. I love how cool Blofeld was when he was talking to Bond. He got the cigarette. He's like, oh, yeah, he's totally got this. So he's like, let's show Mr. Bond to his new quarters. So they go into this side room. It's like a neat cave. And you go down this walkway all the way down to the end of the corridor. And they show him out the window his buddy, who they basically, instead of taking him back down to the village, they tangled him up in the line and left him to freeze to death, I assume. And Bond gets angry and starts fighting back. And Blofeld's like, oh, we can invite you back upstairs when you're more civilized as 007. So they lock him in this room, which is, I guess, the maintenance hatch for the gondola gears. And there's no way to really get out of here, not an easy way anyway. So Bond's kind of stranded there. And he first tries to shimmy along the cable, but the cable ends up activating because the gondola is coming up, and he nearly gets crushed and it's stuck on this lower aft. And he's like, how am I going to get out of here? So then he tries again, and the second time he succeeds. He gets out of there, but then another gondola is coming up and it's threatening to, cut his arm, so he'll fall. And there's actually sort of a jump cut. They skip how he managed to jump successfully from the upper wire down to the cable car, but he did. So he ends up back at Piz Gloria. He sneaks in and is hiding right below the main lounge on the stairwell. And the Angels of Death are all in there. They've gotten their Christmas presents from Irma Bunt. And Blofeld is once again doing the hypnotic thing. And he tells them that, you're going to go to your places around the world, and every night at midnight you're going to chime in and listen to me. And they open their presents, and they all have identical cases. One, I presume, is the poison, along with a couple other things. They have a makeup mirror, or it's not an actual makeup mirror. It's like a little mini radio, so you can talk to them. And they all start falling asleep. And as usual, he says, "You will forget all this when you wake up, but you will remember to call in at midnight." So they wake back up, and Irma Bunt says, "Okay, girls, it's time to go." And she ushers them onto the gondola, and they start heading down the mountain. Bond decides, I guess, that, okay, this place is still too stacked with guards. I'm not going to be able to get to Blofeld. So he goes into the side shed, steals some skis, and puts on a skiing uniform. And then you have, admittedly, a really great ski chase. I do. So the ski chase is pretty awesome. He even gets to a point where he's on the cliffside, and there's like this awkward matte painting of the village down below, but you get the sense of height and a really good tense fighting and that kind of thing.
Well, and also he loses his ski, and there is tension, and he dispatches one, and oh my God, the first guy that he whacks with a ski falls off of the cliff, and you watch him fall and fall and fall, and it's that point where the shadow intersects with his body, and it's like, poof. It was, probably
the longest fall in the whole series, actually. And I like that Blofeld even gets on his skis and gets in on the action, and he sees where one of the directions Bond's going, so he fires a flare to help coordinate the action. But long story short, Bond makes it down to the village, but we see he's too late. The Angels have been put on the bus, and they're being driven away, presumably to the train station. And sadly, that's the last time we see this group of girls in the movie, which I think is another big negative I'll get to later. So Irma Bunt her car's coming to pick her up, and they tell her, Bond escaped. It's like, let's go get him. So Bond takes off to try and get away from him in the crowd. He buys a ticket for the ice skating rink, figuring he'll hide there. And he's getting all scared and stuff because he's like, cornered. He doesn't know what he's going to do. And then out of the blue, after 61 minutes of absence, Tracy shows up. And she's there at the perfect timing. And she's like, my car's... Yeah.
And hubba hubba. It's Diana Rigg again, and also she shows up, and she is a ray of sunshine. She does say, "What are you doing here?" And she says, Bond says, "Have you taken an interest in winter sports?" And she says, "No, you're the only winter sport that I'm interested in, and I knew where to find you because my father told me where you were." Yeah,
which undercuts the entire first half of the film, where the reason Draco wanted Bond to marry her is he felt that she was too rambunctious and needed to be. He even used the word she needed to be dominated, which is
right. But we had that whole Louis Armstrong montage. There's connections made.
But the idea that he thinks that, he wants her to be safe and all that kind of thing. So I'm going to send you up to where Blofeld is, full knowing who he is and how dangerous he is, and that Bond's probably there to kill him. But yeah, let's say, which to me just undercuts his entire thing. But okay. So she's there. They get in the car, and she drives him over to this post office. And he's going to send a message back to MI6, but Irma Bunt does a drive-by. She starts screaming and driving as Bond is running alongside. He gets back in the car. You have a decent car chase that, it starts out decent, but then it gets great when they get to this, like a race derby type thing. Mm-hmm. And they just ram their way through there, and they're getting trapped by the cars. And she's like, what do we do? And eventually he just breaks free of it. They end up back on the main road. They end up hiding out in this barn. And they're going to sit together. And then out of the blue, Bond just decides that he wants to marry her. And he
Okay, you keep going. I don't think it's out of the blue.
Yeah, I think it's pretty out of the blue. Because, I get that she saved you, but again, you didn't have this short little whatever. So it's like, okay, I'm not buying this, but whatever. So the morning after, they go to leave, and they have to take off on their skis as Blofeld and his agents catch up with them, which means that Blofeld's been out here all night long riding around, which is pretty crazy.
Well, it was a pretty severe snowstorm. Like, there is a 1980s sitcom level of snow on the car windshield when they have to hide in the barn. So they've been looking for a while.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And they did cover quite a distance during the initial ski chase and then during the car chase. But I just meant that's a long time to be out in that kind of weather on your skis. Buddies Blofeld, so I guess he could do it. So Bond and Tracy are forced to take off on skis. Blofeld gives chase, and he decides that it would. And this is a great moment where they come to kind of a little fork in the road, so to speak. And Blofeld tells, "Oh, you three, keep after him." And then, even though he sends those three after them, he deliberately starts a giant avalanche by shooting this. And it's like, wow, you're just gonna bury your own three guys? Okay, so you have this really cool avalanche sequence.
Yeah. Like at this point, when they were skiing away from the barn, I was like, seriously, when was this chase scene going to end? And then there's the avalanche, and I was like, holy shit, I'm invested again. Okay, because did they film a real? They must have filmed a real avalanche.
I believe so. They did, yes. And so Bond and Tracy should have been killed by this avalanche, but miraculously they survive. They're separated, so they got separated in the avalanche. So Blofeld's three guards end up catching Tracy and taking her away. And so Bond returns to MI6. And M tells him that Blofeld has made a threat, and that Blofeld's threat is that he will start poisoning either livestock or food supplies unless he gets a full pardon for all past crimes and if he gets the title of Count. Mm-hmm. Why he wants the title of Count or what he's going to do with it, we're not really sure, because as Bond tells M, sir, if we just blow up the facility, he needs that facility to communicate with the Angels of Death. If we destroy it, it's over with. He's like, sorry, Bond, it's already been decided. And I'm thinking, okay, so if he needs the facility to communicate with them, and if he's there to begin with because Switzerland's not extradition country, well, then he can't really leave Piz Gloria if he specifically needs that station to communicate with the Angels of Death. So having the title of Count doesn't seem like it's going to give him anything, and having pardon for past crimes when he can't leave, again, he can't really leave Piz Gloria the way this is really set up. So it's not really clear what Blofeld's getting out of this. It might be a plot hole, but okay. So Bond's kind of frustrated that they won't let him do anything about it. So he goes back to his office and makes a call to Draco, says, I have a job for you. And you actually hear a level of concern in Draco's voice when he first hears that it's Bond, because presumably he knows that his daughter's been kidnapped at this point. And Bond's like, it involves construction and installation of equipment and, blah, blah, blah. And they start taking off towards Piz Gloria in these three helicopters disguised as if they're Red Cross. And they keep telling air traffic control that's what they're doing. Blofeld's guys contact them on the radio as well. They keep insisting that they're Red Cross. Meanwhile, Blofeld and Tracy are talking with each other. And to me, this is probably the best scene in the movie because I get the vibe that Blofeld and Tracy know each other, the way they're having the back and forth. They're very good equals. There's a lot of great wordplay. And, of course, she recognizes her father's voice over the radio. So she insists on going upstairs to the Alpine room because she wants to see I like to see the dawn. And he's like, okay. And he quotes Homer from the Iliad talking about, all the treasures in the world ever cannot satisfy Paris and his Helen. And it's like, okay, she's not really having it. But they go up the elevator, and then she starts quoting another poet and being really great about it with Blofeld, and they're having a good time. And then his guards come up, and they're like, okay, sir, this is serious, and they're coming to attack. And then you have this big action scene where they start unloading with their machine guns and their Gatling guns, and Bond deliberately slides himself across the curling station where his guns are firing again. Tracy.
Oh, and also, I'd like to point out that the guy who James Bond beat the hell out of at the beginning of the movie, he's the guy with the flamethrower who's helping. So even the guy who Bond beat up, like they were Draco's henchmen, now they're on Bond's side. Yeah.
Tracy defeats the main henchman guy with the Olympic thing, and she beats him up pretty good and smashes him throws him down the stairs, and he actually pretends to be knocked out. So when she comes down the stairs, he jumps at her again, and Bond shows up and saves her with her father. And while her dad decides to take care of her by way of forcibly taking her back to the helicopter, she starts pleading with him, and then he punches her out and makes some flippant. I'm like, oh my god!
Spare the rod, spoil the child, huh?
Yeah, this is 1969, I guess.
It's of its time. It's of its time.
So Bond goes down into the lower laboratory. He opens fire. He gets out his camera and he starts taking a picture of the map because the map has all these little dots all over it telling him the cities he sent them to, but it doesn't look like the map specifies which angel is in which city, but each time he takes a picture, they have the little edit to clue in the audience as to what the significance of this is. Mm-hmm. But again, he doesn't have their names or photographs, and there's a bunch of others he hasn't even met yet that Blofeld mentioned, so it's not clear how this map is automatically telling him to find them, because they don't take any of the tapes or he doesn't raid the safe or anything else like that. They just kind of, the whole Piz Gloria gets blown to smithereens, and Blofeld actually seems panicked when he sees this, because this was his plan. So Blofeld takes off in a bobsled, It's a pretty cool chase sequence. Bond ends up catching up with a bobsled, and his bobsled gets thrown off the track, and then he runs down a little ways and jumps onto the Blofeld's bobsled, and he ends up getting presumably breaking Blofeld's neck and killing him on an overhanging branch. And Bond doesn't go back to check if he's dead because I guess he's just naive and just assumed that. And he's like, oh, okay, the world is saved. Even though, again, it's not clear how knowing the locations of the cities without knowing which angel is where is conducive to finding them. But I guess since he blew up the city, or blew up the Piz Gloria, that Blofeld can't really talk to them anymore. So then we cut to this jewelry shop in Portugal, and Bond buys a diamond ring for Tracy. They get married at this big wedding, and it's kind of funny. You see M and Draco kind of having this back and forth, and I'm like, M, the head of MI6, talking with the head of a notorious crime syndicate. Like, they're just all buddy-buddy about it, you know? And, you know, Moneypenny, she's crying and she's looking longingly at Bond because, again, they're trying to say this is the same Bond from the previous 5 movies, but I'm just not feeling it because it's not the same guy. And so he drives off with Tracy. They pull over on the side on the coast because she makes a remark about how they're like a driving flower shop because of all the flowers. So he pulls over and starts pulling the flowers off, and all of a sudden, Blofeld in the driver's seat and Irma Bunt with a machine gun in the back seat of the car. It's a Bentley. They speed by. She fires a few shots. They literally could have just slowed down and done this to make sure they got both of them, but they didn't. They speed by, and Bond's like, oh, Blofeld. He gets angry. He jumps in the car, and he sees that Tracy's dead. And it's a pretty good shot where you have this blurry shot on the windshield, and you see the bullet, and then it comes into focus where she's dead. And he's just completely devastated. He doesn't bother giving chase. This motorcycle cop happens to show up and asks if he's all right. He's like, oh, it's all right. It'll be fine. You see, we have all the time in the world. And it ends on that somber note, but then they start playing the upbeat James Bond music.
Yeah, that was
the end of this movie. True story. They were going to make, as you pointed out, they were going to make this movie after Goldfinger, but then they decided not to because they had to deal with the whole Kevin McClory thing. They were also going to make this movie after Thunderball. But the Swiss Alps have been dealing with a drought that had been going on for a couple of years. And like, well, it's not going to work. So they did You Only Live Twice instead. And that was a mistake because You Only Live Twice, the book, is a direct sequel to On Her Majesty's, where Bond goes rogue to try and find Blofeld.
Oh.
And that's probably why that was the worst of the 5 because, I mean, they made a lot of changes to the first 4 as well, but the main plots of the first 4 were still the same, which is why You Only Live Twice is its own original thing. And I think that's why it was clunky because they didn't have a plot to work from. So they did On Her Majesty's first. They did it out of order. They did You Only Live Twice first and did Her Majesty's second. But they're trying to. My problems with this movie are all sorts of things. One is they're trying to sell you on the idea this is the same guy. Problem is because George Lazenby is inexperienced and not a good actor, he's coming off more as an inexperienced rookie than he is like the grizzled veteran that he should be. Given this is like his 5th time encountering Spectre. It's not just that I think he's my least favorite Bond actor. I just don't consider him Bond at all. I don't like the voice. I don't like the look. It's almost like when when you're shooting a movie, you shoot certain sides of the scene, rarely the whole thing at once. Whereas when I see all the other Bond actors do it, I can picture them playing through the whole scene. Kind of. This feels almost like it's a bunch of quick little snippets stitched together and one-liners. So I'm not buying his performance at all. I don't like it when he breaks the fourth wall. He's not Bond to me at all. The next problem I have with this movie is Tracy is such a, played by Diana Rigg, such a great actress, but they write her out of the movie for a full hour. And as I mentioned before, her father's dumb idea that I'm going to kidnap Bond, hope he forgives me, marries her because I asked nicely. No implied threat of I'm going to kill you if you don't. And the only thing we get out of the first 40 minutes from that encounter with Bond with Tracy and Draco is Blofeld's a lead on Blofeld, like one lead. And that went off into a whole thing. I thought his undercover disguise as Hilary Bray was just ridiculous and a bit much because the dubbing was a bit overdone. The weird canted Dutch angles and everything it was kind of weird. I thought it was really anticlimactic that the last time you see those Angels of Death is when they're being shooed away on the bus. Because I kind of wanted Bond to save them. And I get the implication that he kind of does, but you don't see him again, and it's weird. And the whole time he's up there at Piz Gloria, he's trying to shag all the women up there, and he's clearly forgotten all about Tracy. She's the furthest thing from his mind. He doesn't reflect on her at all. So when her father undercuts the entire reason he wants Bond to marry her by sending her up there, I just feel that she's been gone from the story too long and that I'm just not buying the relationship. Because you didn't have a big montage with Vesper Lynd to Casino Royale. They spent the whole second half nearly an hour of the movie of them being together, building up on that relationship. Whereas with Bond and Tracy, when she found out about her father's plan, that undid any goodwill she had with him before then. So the only time you really get to see them together is during that montage. And it's like, I'm not really getting to know them or, fleshing that out rather nicely. And then the fact that she disappears for a full hour, and now suddenly they want us to think that just because she picked him up in the car and got him out of that jam, that suddenly he's madly in love with her and wants to marry her. I'm like, if you were a rookie, I might be able to buy that. But again, this is supposed to be the grizzled veteran Bond from the previous 5 movies. I just don't buy it at all. So no pun intended. Because I didn't feel that I haven't been really able to bond with this new Bond actor because it's his first movie. I didn't really care that his life was ruined at the end of the film, because it's like, this is the first time I'm meeting this guy, and he's not convincing for me. They didn't spend enough time in the Bond and Tracy relationship, so it just doesn't work. Same when he's in the ice rink and he's like afraid that he's gonna get caught. I think Daniel Craig pulls off vulnerable Bond a lot better and in more convincing situations, whereas here, it's like you were literally being followed by a few guys. You could just as easily disappear into the crowd. I feel if this was Connery's Bond, he would try and improvise. He's not going to break down and start crying and getting scared like a lot of the critics applaud him for in this instance. I didn't really buy that. And like you said, the chase scenes do go on pretty long when they get there. It almost feels like they're trying to overcompensate. And it does kind of bloat the runtime of the film, but so does this whole romance thing. Because it's just like the whole movie started over again once Draco and Tracy left the story. And it's like, I feel it would have been infinitely better if he found out where Blofeld was through a pre-title action scene, goes up to the village, meets Tracy, and maybe say that Tracy wants to reach out to one of her friends who's been at this allergy clinic too long, and have Bond and Tracy working together type of thing. So that way you can spend a lot of time with her so I can actually buy into this relationship, but I just didn't. And so that doesn't work for me. Blofeld, well, Telly's really good. I don't buy him as much as Blofeld. He seems like a great character, kind of like Goldfinger. He's a great character, but the villainy aspect isn't really there. I don't feel like he's the intimidating type of Blofeld that they've, again, set up him from Russia with Love and Thunderball, even though he is better than Donald Pleasance, I thought. And then lastly, like you mentioned, the fight scenes looked a little weird because of the way they did the snap zooms. That just takes. You
said they were weird. I said they were kinetic and hard hitting.
They didn't do that for me. They took me out of it. It just seemed really artificial, like they're channeling the early to Jason Bourne type stuff. And then the absolute worst thing about this movie that I just cannot stand is I hate the cinematography. They did something where the lighting is so damn bright. It's like every shot is oversaturated. Like when he's coming down the stairs in the casino, you have this really nice, all these colors are there, but it's so goddamn bright that everything is washed out. Even their faces look like they have a ghostly power on them because of how bright they are. And then you have weird things like when Tracy and Draco are in the back of the car after they've dropped off Bond. He's super bright, and there's a shadow casting on the wall where she's all in the dark. And it's like, what's this? And the lighting is just, it looks so weird and unnatural and unappealing that it takes me out of the movie. And I just hate that lighting choice. And it's because the director, Peter Hunt, said he was deliberately trying to emulate films from the 50s, which did look like that as well. And the DP, Michael Reed, said that because they were filming largely on location, he couldn't hang any lights from the ceiling. So a lot of the lights were off on the side, which is why you had that effect. But I just hated that. It looked so cheap. And so you combine all of those criticisms I have for the movie. It's like, I think there's a lot of good things in it. I would love if the Bond movie would return to doing like a largely one location story, especially a location as great as Peace Gloria, even though I would have redesigned part of the inside because part of it looked like a cheap hotel. I would not be opposed to them redoing that type of story, which is very character driven. I don't buy him as Bond. I just don't like him as Bond at all. The cinematography sucks. They didn't spend time fleshing out this relationship. She disappears for a full hour of the movie. They did a good job establishing the Angels of Death, but so anticlimactic that you don't get to see them again. And so this movie is just
Well, if I were an insensitive individual, I would say that I accept your apology. I'm not, so I won't. But I can absolutely agree with you in terms of the cinematography, although the interior cinematography I did find washed out. I thought it was colorful, but you're right. I did notice that, and I was like, is this... I'm curious if there's going to be any sort of alteration to that when they release the 4K edition. In terms of I have had a relationship with On Her Majesty's Secret Service that has started exactly where you are right now. And over the years, it has grown more fondly, in my opinion. And I think watching the Being Bond documentary really put it into words that I could express now, especially having gone through the first 5 Connery Bonds, is when they went for Casino Royale, they were trying to bring it back to what they had in the first 2, in Dr. No and From Russia with Love. It had gotten so fantastical by the time you get to You Only Live Twice that to try and up that again would have looked even more cartoonish. We talked about it last week, and I thought I liked You Only Live Twice, but it was a bored Sean Connery, not really trying all that hard, in a fantastical plot that doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And when we get here, the very first shot, when you finally see Lazenby's face and he's like, "Hello, my name's Bond, James Bond." I always found that to be the weakest delivery of that line until I watched it a couple of more times and became more invested in the romance between he and Tracy, simply because this is the first time that he's not trying to impress. He's trying to nurture her from the onset. So the nature of their relationship is very different from anyone else. He's not going in and flexing his nuts. He's like, I have to save this girl. And no reason, not a mission, not a job, just what's she doing? Got to save her, rescue her. And that's the first interaction. And I found it in every subsequent watch more endearing. I really like the fight scenes. I found them, again, kinetic. I find the snap zooms. The fight choreography, I'm always aware of the geography of where the fights are taking place. They are hard hitting. The sound mixing in it is almost like when he flies through, when Bond throws someone through something, the sound makes it feel like I'm being thrown something. So I found the action, just the fist fights, the hand-to-hand combat, very impactful. Draco saying, "I need you to dominate my daughter," I feel like I missed something in that dialogue upon this rewatch, and obviously in previous ones, explaining that she is so reckless and she does whatever she wants. She's not going to, she's a bored, spoiled, rich woman, is how she's painted in the beginning. And Bond says, well, she doesn't need a man. She needs a psychiatrist to get out of whatever I don't know what her problem is. And she obviously feels manipulated, hence the interaction at the bullfight, and saying, I'm just here to play a part in your game. You're a criminal. I know it. That you can't give me anything. You're only taking shit away. Like, this is subtext. This is what I'm reading, because Diana Rigg is such an incredible actress. Doesn't seem like she's pouting. She's obviously angry, hurt, and manipulated. And when she goes in and says, I can do whatever I want, it's like her throwing herself into the ocean is her only way out. When she goes in and says, I made a bet, I can't pay. What are you going to do? Like, you can arrest me if you want. My crime boss dad is going to have me out in no time. It doesn't matter. Like, the affection between Draco and Tracy is already apparent, because he's like, she only comes back for my birthday. And the only bargaining chip that she has is, if you don't tell him what he wants to know, you will never see me again. So he is maintaining her happiness so that she will still be in his life. So he's still manipulating her just so that he can have a daughter. And it's a very human moment where Bond is like, no, wait, you're wrong. Goes, and the first time that you really get a connection between them that isn't based on manipulation or bravado, because when they first meet in the casino, in the hotel, they are classic. Like, that could have been Connery and Diana Rigg doing that scene. I do not think that Connery and Rigg could have done that scene in with the montage or developing their relationship, because I think that Connery would have been too smug. There would have been too much bravado. I believed in the burgeoning relationship from the onset. I never liked We Have All the Time in the World until I finally took the impact of her death at the end. And it took a couple of viewings, because there was a long running theory that I had that was like, if you could CGI Sean Connery into this and have Craig Ferguson dub the voice, I would be so happy. But watching it subsequently, it is absolutely Oh, I believe in their relationship. Then when we get to the middle part, the hour, the mission of this James Bond movie, it's a failure. Bond has gotten the information, he escapes, beautiful action set pieces, but when he gets back to the village, it's not like a couple of guys. There are several cars, there are people going in different places. He's dressed in a blue ski suit, so even when he gets a disguise on, we can still see you're wearing blue leggings, dude. Irma Bunt is all about it. So he doesn't know where to go. There literally is nowhere to go. He has no vehicle. And when she shows up, I thought it was a testament to Tracy, as in, like, well, I wanted to know where you were, so I came to find you. It wasn't, and this is, again, one of the situations where Bond is being rescued, and I don't think that that's something that has been seen a whole heck of a lot in this series so far. So him being taken by her, like, emotionally, paid off for me because of the failure of his mission. And it's when that switches, he appreciates her, can't believe the lengths that she's gone to come find him. And when he proposes marriage, he's already resigned and then been told, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. He's looking for, this is James Bond questioning on Her Majesty's Secret Service from the onset. And when he says, I don't think I'm going to find anybody else like you, there's no point in looking anymore, let's get married. And then she's like, are you serious? And it's like, yep, but we can't have sex now because it's my New Year's resolution. And then, but let's have sex because it's not the new year yet. I thought that was charming and cute, and I never felt an equals presence in the James Bond series between James Bond and the leading lady before, until this. And I think it is very much complemented by the fact that Diana Rigg is a better actress than George Lazenby is an actor. And so her being the dominant personality between the two really, I think, also builds up. You believe that James Bond would fall, or at least this incarnation of James Bond would fall in love with an equal. And from there, it goes and goes and goes and does the rest of the movie. But even then, he says, okay, all we got to do is blow up this thing and everything should be shut down from there. And M says no. And he's like, okay. So he goes and he calls up his crime boss buddies, and he's not even working for MI6 anymore. At this point now, he's just getting shit done. Let's go rescue Tracy. I know how to stop this. It has nothing to do with anything else. Let's grab the girl. Let's go get hitched. We'll take care of stuff on the side, but we're done. And I think at that moment, you get, like, once you get to the end scene and they are married and he is leaving MI6. This could have been the end of the James Bond series. And for a little while, until they got Connery back, it was, because this made half as much as on You Only Live Twice. And so the process of it all, I really, really find it, I believed it more. And then also, Connery never could have delivered the final scene. It wouldn't have landed as hard because it does go from Blofeld, let's go. And it was going to be like Batman and Robin are going to go chase down the bad guy, and him going from let's go to my world is destroyed, which I absolutely accepted, because when I saw After the Hour and Diana Rigg hadn't been around for a while, when she shows up, I was like, thank God you're back. Like, I think that this is the movie that paid more attention to the story of James Bond and Tracy more than the mission, and Her Majesty's Secret Service failed James Bond. And after this, I can see how it keeps going the way that it goes.
Well, I buy that whole story about him questioning Her Majesty's Secret Service. I just didn't buy him, so that's why I didn't really connect with much of it. I think Connery would have been better for 99. Like, I think he would have been better for the whole thing, because not only would I have been more emotionally invested in the character, telling you that this is the same guy, because again, Lazenby's playing it like a rookie, but he's supposed to be like the grizzled veteran type of thing. And because he didn't spend that much time, I mean, you're right, Diana Rigg is a significantly better actress, which is why I didn't feel the chemistry between them very much. And like when he says, "Oh, you're the only woman for me," it's like, you're right. That's the first time in the series we've really seen somebody come. Well, it's actually the second time in the series because Bond, again, Largo was about to kill him on the Disco Volante, and what's her name, Domino, saved him at the last second. You could tell he was relieved. Here, yeah, I guess you're right. Being a rookie, I could buy him being a bit more. I wouldn't buy him breaking down and practically crying, getting scared over that. Like he would, like, he'd be like, "Come at me!" Like if he's about to go down, he would go down swinging. Not go down like biting his fingernails, like, "Oh, dude, what am I going to do?" But if he's a rookie, then yeah, I could buy that. Or a real rookie, not yet 007 even, I could buy that. But that's why I wonder if it's only if it had worked out. Like if Connery had been on good terms with the producers and if they had paid him the money he'd wanted from the beginning so they weren't upset, and if there hadn't been a drought, then On Her Majesty's would have been the 5th movie. I think it would have been great. Still would have had the problem of trying to find out how to integrate Tracy more in the story for me to care about that relationship. Even though I agree on paper, everything you're saying, it does make sense. I'm just not feeling any of it while I watch this film. And then that way they could have done You Only Live Twice as the 6th film and adapted it faithfully. And that would have been, I think, a good ending as well. But yeah, so it's just, and then this one also I thought was one of the biggest offenders in terms of rear projection, because just about every close-up or medium shot in that ski chase was not, that was like they weren't really, you could tell they weren't there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really want to like this movie. I just can't.
Fair enough. Well, no, I appreciate what you're saying, and if you don't connect with the actor who's playing James Bond, and I've had this conversation before as a Dalton fan. Some people just don't dig on it because they find him either too dry or what have you. It like there are arguments for and against everyone's Bonds, or even just the Bonds along the way. But if you don't connect with Bond and it doesn't ring true, I can't say you're wrong, and I can't accept your apology because there's no apology given. So yeah, no, I get it. I think that all we have to do now is throw down some martinis. How many martinis would you give this Mamma Jamma?
Let's see. I want to hear yours first.
I'm gonna have to go back and find out. We're gonna re-rate because I'm gonna find out what we said at the end of each of the other ones as well. But I think I'm gonna go with 6 martinis.
Oh really? I thought it'd be a lot higher.
No, it's because I am forgiving it a lot, but I'm forgiving it a lot more, and not for Lazenby. Like I appreciate it for where it is. I want it to be more in continuity, and I feel like because it is a one-off Bond, and because it isn't really like there, and I love Diamonds Are Forever, but it's not tied up. None of this is tied up. You have this standalone movie, and I like it for what it is. But I'm gonna give it a 6, just because there are downsides to it. And again, I got bored, but I was perked back up. Yeah, 6.
I'm gonna give it 3. Keeping in mind that I'm rating this in conjunction with other Bond movies, not against other movies in general, or I might give it a little higher. But I give it a 3 because of all my problems with it, and then again the ill satisfaction that you're telling me this is the same guy, but it's clearly not, and he's not playing it anywhere near the same. And like you said, it's not tied up. It feels like I mean, it is a shame that they kind of threw this one under the bus when they started marketing the next movie, but and the fact that Lazenby, I think also what hurt this movie when it came out was Lazenby already made it clear that he wasn't coming back. And he showed up to the press junket and he just totally didn't care. He'd grown out his hair and he was acting like a hippie and being all artsy fartsy and totally like dissing on the movie basically. And I'm pretty sure that had a lot to do with the box. I think that had more to do with why the movie failed financially as opposed to the predecessor, because at least the predecessor still did make money. You Only Live Twice. Like you said, this one only made about half. And I think that's because, well, getting the audiences used to somebody who's not Connery, but them knowing that the new guy's only there for one movie and that he doesn't even seem to like it, because of the press junkets. I think that really hurt the film, and that's why Lazenby didn't go on to be the big leading guy that people thought he was gonna be. I don't think it's simply because some people said they thought maybe because of his attitude on set. I mean, yeah, there's stories about being cocky or whatever, but I think it's more so that he just wasn't that great of an actor. And once you start going all nuts like that, it's like, geez, how can you get him to sign a commitment if he's potentially because the reason he didn't come back was because his agent stupidly told him that, oh, nobody's gonna care about James Bond in the next decade. You shouldn't sign the 7-film extension. But seeing as I wasn't crazy about Lazenby, I'm kind of happy he didn't sign that extension.
True. And the first person to tell you that Lazenby made a mistake is Lazenby.
Yeah, he'll be very candid, and depending on what year you ask him, he might say something different, but he's been very upfront about it. So
anyway, let's check out the chat, see what's going on with all the people who happen to be here. Darius Munchausen, ahoy, hail at the Phantasmagorium show. And the beat goes on, gives a big old Star Trek Day salute. Oh, and the beat goes on. Baby Bond. Kat, are we ever going to get to James Bond Jr.?
Eventually.
Maybe. Okay. Gundle's here. Kamel Khan. Yes. And the beat goes on. I'm assuming that's a Moonraker. Only Ben Affleck can stop the Moonraker. Gundle Whittlebaum says, Irma Bunt's last movie.
Yes, actress Ilse Steppert, who is mostly actress from German films and the stage, died like the day before the movie came out or something, or a couple days after. Yeah, so that was actually the reason that Telly Savalas didn't come back, because he's like, well, if Lazenby's not coming back and we can't get back Irma, who we thought was, or Ilse, who we thought was fantastic, he wasn't coming back either, which is, I think, why they totally jettisoned the idea of making Diamonds a sequel that was originally going to be, which is a shame.
That is a shame. That's interesting, but a shame. Cinema Gulp. Hey, Cinema Gulp. I am alone on this one, but I love Max Zorin. It's the Walken, for God's sake.
You are not alone. I love Max Zorin. He's the reason View to a Kill is a bit higher on my list than it is for others. He is just fantastic.
And Gundle holding it up and bringing the knowledge. Kat, you're not the only one who knows Ilse Steppets. Anyway, you know a lot, though. I don't mean to take you down a peg in terms of your knowledge. I'm impressed every time you take me to school, lady. Gundle says, I'm a fan of Zorin too. I can't understand folks that don't love A View to a Kill. 2 words, Stacey Sutton.
Yeah, and the fact that I have to concede that he's way over the. I can't. As much, even though I ranked Dalton lower than Roger in terms of my favorite Bonds, I do concede that View to a Kill would have been a much better movie with Timothy Dalton in the Bond role for sure.
Cinema Gulp says it's a total hokey perfect Bond villain for Max Zorin, saying that to Gundle. And Gundle says totes. And the beat goes on, says if a woman need a schmack, Bond will give it to her. But you don't expect to see familial abuse.
Yeah, that's true.
Cinema Gulp says, thank you, Scotty, and definitely Kat for the education on Bond over this series so far. Great program, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. And again, Kat, this is a clinic on James Bond every time you're here. I'm so happy.
What an interesting choice of words, because this film took place in a clinic.
No pun intended. I'll used up my no pun intended. And the beat goes on, says 5 martinis, shaken, not stirred. I can take that as a middle of the road. Hey, it's Damn C. Scotty, did the Aussies ever apologize to you for Lazenby? Oh, no. Okay, so, yeah, that's a story.
I got to hear it now.
No, I spent a year in Australia, and I was working in a pub. And the one time that I thought that I was going to get my ass kicked as a bartender was I said to the Australians around the bar, it's like, I've been here for an entire 6 months and not a single person has apologized for George Lazenby. And oh my God. And this was before I was absolutely in the same camp as you. I was like, no, it sucks. And this would have been about 10, 12 years ago. And they were like, you better take that back. We'll kick you out right now. So I did, because I'm a coward.
Oh, don't take it back.
I had to. They were bigger than me. And the beat goes on, says, great show. And the beat goes on, says, Tim Dalton was underrated. I agree. And damn, thank you. Oh, Scotty. Oh, James. Well, that seems to be everybody in the chat. thank you everyone for coming to play and watching. If you want to check out any of our previous episodes, we've done Dr. No through on Her Majesty's Secret Service, all leading up to No Time to Die. We got to ease you into the first recasting, and we're going to change gears a little bit because we have a No Time to Die to see soon. So I think we are switching it up, and we're going to Casino Royale next week.
Yes, we are going to spend the next 4 weeks reviewing the 4 Craig films. We will have a heads up. We will have a special episode either on Saturday, October 9th or Sunday, October 10th, recapping No Time to Die. We'll probably recap it as well in our October 13th episode for a regular scheduled slot. But we assume now that it should be safe that the film is definitely coming out now. The only thing I could possibly see change, especially with the news that Shang-Chi did so good at the box office by pandemic standards, even though let's face it, No Time to Die is going to fail. It's unfortunate. It's not making $930 million. But I think they'll release it simply because they don't have the money to not release it. I think if they do change their minds, that wouldn't be until maybe next Monday at the latest, but I'm pretty sure it's coming out. If they do change their minds before next week, then we'll change gears and maybe just review Diamonds Are Forever and go that way, continue along, but I don't think that'll be the case. So next week, if all it stays according to plan, Casino Royale, the 2006 version.
And Dan says, are you going to cover Never Say Never Again?
Yes, that will be on track, probably the January 26th episode, because we'll finish the Eon films on January 19th.
Kat knows the show better than I do, and the schedule as well. So yeah, we will do that one. Are we going to do the funny Casino Royale?
We'll do both Casino Royales, the 7 version and the 54 version.
But next week is definitely Daniel Craig. Well, I'm sure we're going to rank something. I'm not sure what yet.
Either that, or we could just find other things to discuss that are maybe more Daniel Craig related. We can get into our predictions for the upcoming movie, or our things that a checklist of things we want to have happen, or things we want to see, or I don't know, something. I mean, eventually we're going to run out of things to rank, and yeah.
It's true. Watches. So yeah, no, we will return next week for Casino Royale. Thank you again, Kat, and for Steve, who is on Top Secret Double Plus assignment. I'm sure we're going to be finishing off with a trailer for his book called Let's All Go to the Lobby. My name is Scotty R. 37. This is Kat. We will see you next week. See ya.